Hey guys, tonight we step into a room filled with buttons, blinking lights, and decisions that would echo across the world. This is a different kind of journey. No ancient ruins, no forgotten empires. Just a control room in northern Ukraine on a night that started like any other. The year is 1986. The place is Chernobyl nuclear power plant, reactor number 4. And you're about to experience what really happened inside that room moment by moment, before everything changed. Now, if you're new here, welcome to a space where history meets calm, where we slow down, breathe, and walk through the past without rushing. If you've been here before, thank you for coming back. Tonight, we're doing something a little different. We're not just observing history, we're standing inside it. Before we begin, here's a gentle request. If you enjoy this kind of deep, immersive storytelling, consider subscribing. It helps us create more of these journeys together. And if you're already subscribed, thank you. You're part of something special. Maybe hit that like button too, just so we know you're here with us tonight. I'm curious, where in the world are you right now? What time is it where you are? Drop a comment below. It's always amazing to see how many different places we connect from, all gathering here for the same quiet moment. Some of you are winding down after a long day. Others are settling in for the night. Wherever you are, you're exactly where you need to be. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the control room of Reactor 4. It's April 25th, 1986, moving toward midnight. The evening shift is underway. Around you, panels stretch across the walls. Rows of switches, analog dials, indicator lights in red and green. Everything hums softly. The air smells faintly metallic, with a trace of cigarette smoke drifting from the corner where someone leans against a console, reviewing printed readouts. The room is larger than you'd expect. Not cramped like a submarine, more like an industrial classroom. Metal floors, fluorescent lights overhead casting everything in a cool, clinical glow. The walls are painted that particular shade of Soviet institutional beige, the kind that exists nowhere in nature. Papers are scattered across desks. Technical manuals. Clipboards with handwritten notes in Cyrillic. Someone has left a half-empty glass of tea on the edge of a panel. You're not alone. There are maybe a dozen people here. Engineers in white lab coats. Technicians in dark work suits. A supervisor near the back, arms folded, watching the main display. Most of them are young, 30s, maybe early 40s. They've been working at this plant for years. They know these systems. They trust them. Outside the windows, the night is dark and still. You can see the silhouette of the reactor building against the sky. A few lights scattered across the complex. The town of Pripyat sleeps a few kilometers away. 50,000 people, families, children. They have no idea what tonight will bring. Neither do you. Neither does anyone in this room. The reactor is running. That's what it does. It runs, day and night, generating electricity for Ukraine and beyond. Reactor 4 is one of the newer units here. It's been operational since 1983. Modern by Soviet standards. Reliable. The RBMK design, a graphite-moderated reactor cooled by water. Powerful. Efficient. A source of pride. Tonight, there's a test scheduled. A safety test, technically. Nothing dramatic. The goal is simple. If the plant loses external power, can the reactor's cooling pumps run on residual turbine energy long enough for the backup diesel generators to kick in? It's a gap of about 40 seconds. The test has been postponed twice already. Once for grid demand issues. Once because the day shift didn't want to deal with it. So here you are. Late shift. Quiet night. Might as well get it done. Someone adjusts a switch. The click echoes softly. A dial needle moves. You watch the numbers. Reactor power is stable. Everything is where it should be. The hum continues. The lights stay green. Outside, steam rises lazily from the cooling towers, visible even in the darkness. It looks almost peaceful. Historians still argue whether the decision to proceed that night was inevitable or avoidable. Some say the test was poorly designed from the start. Others point to the pressure from Moscow to complete it. A few suggest that any crew on any night would have made the same choices. You don't know yet. You're just here, standing in the moment before everything splits into before and after. The clock on the wall reads 11:47 p.m. Someone coughs. Papers rustle. A phone rings in another room, muted through the walls. The test is about to begin. Not now. Soon. Within the hour. First, the reactor power needs to come down. That's step one. Reduce power gradually. Let the system stabilize. Then run the test. Simple. You lean against one of the consoles. The metal is cool under your hand. The panel in front of you displays coolant flow rates, pressure readings, neutron flux levels. Everything is color-coded. Red for critical, yellow for caution, green for normal. Right now, it's almost all green. A few yellows here and there. Nothing unusual. Nothing that feels wrong. This room has seen thousands of shifts. Thousands of ordinary nights. Operators have stood exactly where you're standing, watching the same panels, reading the same numbers. The reactor doesn't care that it's Friday night going into Saturday morning. It just runs. That's what makes nuclear power beautiful, in a way. Constant. Predictable. As long as you respect the physics respects you. But there's something about tonight. Not a feeling exactly. More like a subtle weight in the air. Maybe it's just the lateness of the hour. Maybe it's knowing that after months of delays, this test is finally happening. Maybe it's nothing. The deputy chief engineer walks past you. Anatoly Dyatlov. He's been pushing to get this test done. He wants it finished tonight. He's not unkind, just focused, determined. He glances at the main display, nods to himself, and moves toward the back of the room. Someone else, you don't catch his name, asks a question about the test protocol. The answer is brief, confident. We've done this before. We know what we're doing. And maybe that's true. Maybe everything will go exactly as planned. The power will drop. The test will run. The turbines will coast. The pumps will keep spinning. The diesels will roar to life. And by dawn, it'll all be over. Just another completed checklist. Just another night at Chernobyl. You take a breath. The air tastes stale. Recycled. The ventilation system hums somewhere behind the walls. Outside, the darkness presses against the windows. Inside, the lights stay steady. The dials hold their positions. The reactor waits. It's time. The test parameters are printed on a single sheet of paper, clipped to a board, passed from hand to hand. You've seen it already. Everyone has. The procedure is straightforward on paper. Reduce reactor power from its current 3,200 megawatts thermal down to somewhere between 700 and 1,000. Hold it steady there. Disconnect the emergency cooling system. It would interfere with the test. Then shut off steam to the turbines and let them coast down naturally, using their rotational inertia to keep the cooling pumps running for those critical 40 seconds until the diesel generators take over. Simple, mechanical, a question of timing. You watch as Leonid Topchinov, the senior reactor control engineer, settles into his chair at the main control panel. He's 26 years old, young for this position, serious, methodical. His hands rest on the console, waiting. Near him sits Alexander Akimov, shift foreman, 33 years old, calm demeanor, responsible. He's the one who'll coordinate everything tonight. He glances at the clock, then at Topchinov, then at the printed procedure. Everything is ready. Dyatlov stands near the back, arms crossed, watching. He wants this done, not out of recklessness, out of necessity. The test has been hanging over the plant like an unfinished sentence for too long. Safety requirements demand it. The room is quieter now. The casual conversation from earlier has faded. People have taken their positions. You can hear the hum of the ventilation more clearly now. The soft clicking of relays. The occasional beep from a monitoring station. Historians still argue whether the test design itself was fundamentally flawed. Some point out that the RBMK reactor becomes less stable at low power, a quirk of its physics. Others note that the procedure didn't account for xenon-135 poisoning, a temporary but significant effect that occurs when power drops too quickly. But all of that is hindsight. Right now, in this moment, the test is just a procedure. Topchinov begins the power reduction. His hand moves to a control. A gentle adjustment. On the panel above him, numbers begin to change. Slowly, the reactor power starts its descent. 3,200 megawatts. Then 3,100. Then 3,000. The process is gradual, controlled. Around you, other operators monitor their stations. Coolant flow, steam pressure, core temperature, neutron flux distribution. Every system has its own panel, its own set of indicators. Nuclear reactors are complex organisms. You don't just turn a single dial. You manage dozens of interconnected variables. The reactor responds smoothly. Power continues to drop. 2,800 megawatts. 2,600. Everything is nominal. The control rods are functioning correctly. The coolant is flowing. The steam output is adjusting. This is routine, but there's something building that nobody discusses. The reactor has been running at full power for weeks without interruption. That means Xenon-135, a neutron-absorbing fission product, has built up to equilibrium levels in the core. At lower power, the balance shifts. The xenon doesn't burn away. It accumulates, and it absorbs neutrons that would otherwise sustain the reaction. Nobody mentions this right now. The operators are aware of it in an abstract sense, but the procedure doesn't emphasize it. The timeline doesn't account for how significant it will become. The power continues down. 2,400 megawatts. 2,200. Topchanov's eyes move between the panel and his notes. Akimov stands beside him now, one hand on the back of Topchanov's chair. They speak quietly, confirming readings. Everything is still normal. Outside the windows, nothing has changed. The night remains dark. Steam continues its lazy rise from the cooling towers. Inside, the fluorescent lights cast the same cool glow. Time moves forward at its usual pace. At 2,000 megawatts, there's a pause. A brief hold. They wait for the reactor to stabilize at this intermediate level. The dials settle. The indicators hold steady. Good. The system is responding predictably. No surprises. No alarms. Someone lights another cigarette. The smoke curls upward. Someone else makes a note on a clipboard. The phone rings in the adjacent room. Briefly, then stops. These small details. These ordinary moments. Dyatlov checks his watch. They're on schedule. The power reduction is going smoothly. At this rate, they'll reach the target range within the hour. Run the test. Complete the procedure. Have the paperwork done before the morning shift arrives. But then something happens. Not dramatic. Not alarming. Just a request. The grid controller calls. Kiev needs more power. Just for a while. An hour, maybe two. Some demand spike they didn't anticipate. Can Chernobyl hold at 1,600 megawatts for a bit before continuing the test? The answer is yes. Of course. The grid takes priority. Safety tests can wait. So the power reduction stops. Right there at 1,600 megawatts. The reactor holds. The test is delayed. Not canceled. Just paused. Topchanov leans back in his chair. Akimov makes a notation. The room relaxes slightly. Not much. Just a subtle release of tension. The immediate task is done. Now they wait. You watch the clock. 12:28 a.m. The night deepens. Outside, Pripyat sleeps. Inside, the control room settles into a holding pattern. The test will resume. Eventually, when Kiev releases them. Until then, you wait. The pause stretches. 1 hour becomes 2. The operators remain at their stations. Some review procedures again. Some drink tea. Some just watch the panels, the way you might watch a familiar road while driving. Attentive but not tense. And slowly, invisibly, the xenon builds. The call comes through at 12:28 a.m. Kiev releases them. The grid can manage without the extra power now. The test can resume. Topchanov straightens in his chair. Akimov moves closer to the console. Dyatlov nods from the back of the room. Time to continue. The target is still the same. Somewhere between 700 and 1,000 megawatts thermal. From the current 1,600, that's a significant drop, but it should be manageable. The reactor has been holding steady for over an hour. The systems are stable. Everything is ready. Topchanov begins the power reduction again. His hand moves to the controls. The same gentle adjustments as before. The same methodical process. Power starts to descend. 1,500 megawatts. 1,400. The numbers drop smoothly at first. The reactor responds as expected. But something is different now. That invisible accumulation during the pause. The Xenon 135 has been building. At high power, it burns away continuously. At reduced power, especially during that long hold at 1,600 megawatts, it accumulated without being consumed. Now, as power drops further, the xenon acts like a neutron sponge, absorbing, dampening, making the reactor less responsive. Topchanov doesn't see this directly. There's no xenon meter on his panel, no flashing warning, just the behavior of the reactor itself, the way power responds to control inputs. And right now, it's responding more sluggishly than before. 1,200 megawatts. 1,000. The descent continues. But the rate isn't quite right. The reactor wants to drop faster than intended. Topchanov compensates. Small adjustments. Trying to smooth the curve. Keep it controlled. 900 megawatts. 800. Getting close to the target range now. Just a little further. Hold it steady somewhere around 700 or 800. That's the plan. But then the power drops through 700. Through 600. Topchanov's hands move faster. He's trying to catch it. Trying to level it out. The reactor isn't responding the way it should. The xenon poisoning is stronger than expected. The control systems are fighting against it. 500 megawatts. 400. This isn't right. This is too low. Far below the test parameters. Akimov leans in closer. His voice is calm but urgent. Level it out. Bring it back up. We need at least 700. Topchanov is trying. His hands move across the controls. Adjusting. Compensating. But the reactor has momentum now. Momentum downward. 300 megawatts. 200. The numbers keep falling. At 30 megawatts, something happens. The automatic control system triggers. It's designed to prevent the reactor from shutting down completely during normal operations. Control rods begin to withdraw automatically, pulling back, making space for more neutrons, more reactions, trying to boost the power back up. Historians still argue whether this automatic response was appropriate or whether it should have been overridden. Some suggest the operators should have scrammed the reactor immediately, initiated an emergency shutdown, rather than trying to recover. Others point out that our BMK reactors were notoriously difficult to restart after a full shutdown, and the political pressure to complete the test was immense. The power stabilizes, then slowly begins to climb. 50 megawatts, 100, 150. It's coming back. Not quickly, not smoothly, but it's rising. Topchanov continues to work the controls. Manual adjustments now. The automatic system has done what it can. Now it's up to human judgment. 200 megawatts. The climb slows. The xenon is still there, still absorbing neutrons, making everything harder. More control rods are withdrawn, manually, one by one, creating more space for the reaction to build. The room is quieter than before. No casual talk now. No cigarettes being lit. Just focused attention. Eyes on panels. Hands on controls. The easy confidence from earlier has been replaced by something more careful, more deliberate. The power reaches 200 megawatts and holds there. Not ideal. Well below the 700 to 1,000 target, but stable. For now, Topchanov looks at Akimov. Akimov looks at Dyatlov. Should they abort? Reschedule? Wait for the xenon to decay naturally? Dyatlov's answer is firm. Continue. They can run the test at 200 megawatts. It's not optimal, but it's sufficient. The turbines will still coast. The pumps will still run. The principle is the same, and the test has already been delayed too many times, aborted too many times. This ends tonight. There's a pause, a moment of decision. Akamov hesitates. This isn't within the original parameters. But orders are orders, and maybe will work. Maybe 200 megawatts is enough. Topchanov nods, accepts it. His hands remain on the controls. The reactor sits at this new, lower equilibrium. Unstable, xenon poisoned. More control rods withdrawn than is typical, but stable enough. Holding. Outside, the night continues. The darkness presses against the windows. Steam rises. Pripyat sleeps. Inside, the fluorescent lights hum. The panels glow. The dials hold their new positions. Lower than expected. Lower than planned. But holding. You watch the numbers. 200 megawatts thermal. The reactor is barely ticking over now, running at roughly 6% of its normal power. In this state, it's like an engine idling too low. Vulnerable. Sensitive. The physics becomes nonlinear. Small changes can have outsized effects. But the test must continue. That's the decision. That's the path chosen. The reactor will be held here, at this awkward, uncomfortable power level. And soon, very soon, the next phase will begin. The clock reads 1:03 a.m. More than an hour since the power reduction resumed. The xenon continues its invisible work. The control rods remain withdrawn, and the reactor waits, barely breathing, barely sustaining itself, caught between stability and collapse. The reactor sits at 200 megawatts, unstable, xenon poisoned, but holding. Now comes the next challenge. The reactor needs to stay at this power level, steady, controlled, long enough to complete the test. That means compensating for the xenon. That means withdrawing more control rods. Control rods are the reactor's main safety mechanism. Long cylinders of neutron-absorbing material that slide up and down through channels in the core. When inserted, they dampen the reaction. When withdrawn, they allow it to grow. In normal operation, you keep a certain number inserted, a safety margin, a buffer against unexpected power increases. But this isn't normal operation. The reactor is fighting against xenon poisoning. To maintain even this low power level, more and more rods need to come out. Topchanov works methodically, one rod at a time. Each withdrawal is logged. Each position is noted. The panel shows how many remain inserted. The number keeps dropping. Akamov watches. He knows the regulations. There's a minimum number of control rods that must remain inserted at all times. 30. That's the safety threshold. Below that, the reactor becomes difficult to control. Below that, you're operating outside the design envelope. The count approaches 30, then passes it. 28 rods inserted. 26. Topchanov glances at Akamov. Akamov glances at Dyatlov. Nobody says stop. The test must continue. The power must hold. 24 rods inserted. 22. The reactor is being held in this state through manual intervention. Through human will. The automatic systems can't manage this configuration. Only the operators can. Only their constant adjustments. Their continuous corrections. There's a lesser-known detail about our BMK reactor design. The control rods themselves have quirk. The tips are made of graphite, a neutron moderator, while the main length is boron carbide, a neutron absorber. This means that when a rod begins to insert from a fully withdrawn position, it actually causes a brief power increase before the absorbing section takes effect. A design flaw that seemed insignificant in normal operations. But here, now, with so few rods inserted, that quirk becomes more relevant. Nobody discusses this. Not tonight. The operators know about it in theory, but operational procedures don't emphasize it. The test protocol doesn't account for it. It's just another detail in a system filled with details. Another variable in an equation that's becoming increasingly complex. The power holds at 200 megawatts. The control rod count stabilizes. 18, sometimes 16, depending on which systems you include in the count. Well below the safety margin, but stable enough. The reactor continues to run. Other systems need adjustment too. The coolant flow is too high for this power level. Normally, flow rates match power output. High power, high flow. Low power, low flow. But tonight, the test requires keeping the coolant pumps running at nearly full capacity, even though the reactor is barely producing heat. This creates an unusual condition. Too much cooling. The water moves through the core so quickly that it doesn't heat up properly. Steam quality drops. The water-steam mixture becomes mostly water. More physics. More complications. In an RBMK reactor, water absorbs neutrons. Steam doesn't. So more water means more neutron absorption, which means the reactor becomes even harder to sustain, which means more control rods need to be withdrawn, which reduces the safety margin further. Everything connects. Everything influences everything else. Historians still argue whether the operators understood the full implications of these compounding factors. Some suggest they were following procedures that didn't account for this specific combination of conditions. Others argue they should have recognized the danger and stopped. A few point out that our BMK reactors were designed with certain inherent instabilities that only became apparent in extreme configurations like this one. Topchanov continues making adjustments. Small corrections. The power wavers slightly. 190 megawatts. 210. Back to 200. He's managing it, keeping it balanced. It requires constant attention. The reactor won't hold this state on its own. It needs human guidance, human intervention. Every minute, every second. The clock shows 1:15 a.m. The test hasn't even started yet. This is still preparation, still setup, getting the reactor into the correct configuration. Except the configuration isn't correct. It's improvised, adapted, forced into a state that the designers never intended. Around you, the other operators monitor their specific systems. Cooling water chemistry, steam separator pressure, turbine status. Each person has their domain, their responsibility. The control room functions as a collective. No single person sees the entire picture. No single panel displays the full state of the reactor. You have to synthesize information from multiple sources. Trust that everyone is reporting accurately. Trust that the systems are behaving as designed. Dyatlov walks between the stations, checking progress, asking questions, receiving answers. He wants to proceed. The reactor is stable enough. The power is holding. Yes, it's lower than planned. Yes, more control rods are withdrawn than usual. But it's within operational limits. Barely. Technically. And the test has been delayed too many times already. A phone rings. Someone answers. Brief conversation. Grid status check. Everything is fine. Pripyat is quiet. The region is sleeping. Power demand is low. Perfect conditions for the test. No external interruptions. No sudden grid fluctuations. Just this control room. This reactor. This decision. Topchanov's hands remain on the controls. His eyes move between displays. Power level. Control rod positions. Coolant flow. Neutron flux distribution. Everything needs to balance. Everything needs to hold. The reactor is like a ball balanced on a hill. Not rolling yet, but requiring constant tiny adjustments to keep it in place. The air feels different now. Heavier somehow. Maybe it's just fatigue. Maybe it's the lateness of the hour. Maybe it's the knowledge that this configuration is unusual. That they're operating in territory that feels unfamiliar. Not exactly dangerous. Just uncomfortable. Like driving a car with the steering wheel not quite centered. Outside, nothing has changed. The dark Ukrainian sky. The silhouette of reactor buildings. The lazy steam from cooling towers. Inside, the fluorescent lights continue their steady hum. The panels glow. The numbers hold. And everyone waits for the next phase. The actual test. The reason for all of this. Just a little longer. Just get through the preparation. Then 40 seconds of turbine coast down. Then it's over. Then they can return the reactor to normal operation. Then everything goes back to routine. But first, they have to hold this moment. This configuration. This delicate balance. just a little longer. You notice the people more clearly now. The individuals behind the positions. The shift has been on duty for hours. Fatigue is starting to show. Not dramatically, just small signs. The way someone rubs their eyes. The way another shifts weight from one foot to the other. The empty tea glasses accumulating on desk edges. Leonid Topchinov is the youngest in the room. 26. Married less than a year. He graduated from Moscow Engineering Physics Institute. Top marks. Bright future. He's been senior reactor control engineer at Chernobyl for only a few months. Still proving himself. Still learning the specific rhythms of this particular reactor. Tonight is a test of more than just the turbines. It's a test of his capability, his judgment, his right to be in this chair. Alexander Akimov is older, more experienced. 33. He has a calm presence, the kind of person others instinctively trust. He's responsible for this shift, for everything that happens during these hours. If something goes wrong, it falls on him. He knows the regulations. He knows the safety limits. And right now, watching the control rod count, watching the power level, he knows they're operating outside normal parameters. But orders are orders, and maybe it will be fine. Anatoly Dyatlov is the deputy chief engineer for operations. 53 years old. He's seen things. He survived a reactor accident at a submarine facility years ago. Radiation exposure, illness, recovery. He knows what nuclear systems can do, what they can withstand. He's confident, perhaps too confident, or perhaps realistically confident based on his experience. Historians still argue about his state of mind that night. Was he reckless? Was he under pressure from above? Was he simply doing his job the way he understood it? There are others. Boris Stolyarchuk at the turbine control panel. Yuri Tregub monitoring auxiliary systems. Razim Davletbayev overseeing the reactor section. Viktor Proskurikov on shift as the reactor shop manager. Each person has their role, their training, their assumption that the system will hold because it always has. The culture in Soviet nuclear plants was hierarchical. Orders flowed downward. Questions flowed upward cautiously. You didn't challenge your superiors lightly. You trusted that they had information you didn't, that they saw the bigger picture, that they knew what they were doing. This wasn't unique to the Soviet Union. It exists in many organizations, many industries, many moments in history where something goes wrong and afterward people ask, why didn't someone speak up? But speak up about what, exactly? The reactor is running. The power is holding. Yes, the configuration is unusual. Yes, they're outside some safety margins. But nothing is breaking. No alarms are screaming. The physics is complex, but it's still physics. It still follows rules. And these people are trained to manage complexity. Topchinov makes another adjustment. A small one. The power dips to 195 megawatts. He corrects. Back to 200. His hands are steady. His face shows concentration, but not panic. This is challenging, but it's manageable. He's managing it. Every operator in this room has dealt with difficult situations before. Equipment malfunctions, unexpected transients, grid fluctuations. You adapt. You compensate. You keep the reactor running. The cigarette smoke is thicker now. Several people are smoking. The ventilation system handles it, but not completely. A haze hangs in the upper part of the room, caught in the fluorescent light, moving slowly. Nobody comments on it. Smoking is normal, especially during night shifts, especially during tense situations. It's something to do with your hands, something to focus on besides the panels. Someone laughs quietly at something. A brief moment of levity. You don't catch what was said, but the sound is jarring somehow. Out of place, or maybe perfectly in place. Maybe humor is how people manage stress, how they signal to each other that everything is under control, that this is just another night, just another challenge, nothing they can't handle. The clock shows 1:22 a.m. The test is about to begin. Finally, after all the delays, after all the complications with the power reduction, after stabilizing at this uncomfortable 200 megawatt level. Now comes the actual procedure. The reason for everything tonight. Akimov reviews the sequence one more time. Disconnect the emergency core cooling system. Already done. Confirm auxiliary feedwater pumps are running. Check. Increase coolant flow to maximum. Done. Verify turbine generator parameters. Within range. Close the turbine stop valves to initiate coast down. That's the final step. That's what starts everything. The turbines are massive machines, spinning at 3,000 revolutions per minute, weighing hundreds of tons. When the steam supply cuts off, they don't stop immediately. They coast, gradually slowing. And as they slow, they continue to generate electricity from their rotational momentum. That electricity will power the cooling pumps for about 40 seconds, long enough for the diesel generators to start up and take over. That's the theory. That's what they're testing. Dyatlov gives the order. Proceed. Begin the test. Akimov nods. Topchinov acknowledges. Stolyarchuk at the turbine panel prepares. Everyone takes their position. Hands hover over controls. Eyes focus on displays. The room becomes very still. Very quiet. This is the moment they've been building toward. Everything until now has been preparation. Setup. Adjustment. Now comes the execution. The actual test. 40 seconds that will prove the reactor can protect itself during a station blackout. 40 seconds that will complete the procedure. 40 seconds that will let everyone go back to normal operations. Outside, Pripyat sleeps. 50,000 people in their beds. Children dreaming. Parents resting. Families safe in their apartments. The town is dark except for streetlights. The reactor complex glows softly in the distance. A familiar sight. A source of pride. The plant that powers the region. The plant that provides jobs. The plant that makes this town exist. Inside the control room, someone clears his throat. Someone else adjusts his glasses. Topchinov's hand moves to the control that will initiate the turbine coast-down sequence. Not yet. Waiting for final confirmation. Waiting for Akimov's word. Waiting for everything to align. The reactor hums at 200 megawatts. 18 control rods inserted. Coolant flowing at maximum rate. Steam pressure holding. All systems showing stable readings. Unusual configuration, yes, but stable. Ready. Akimov speaks. His voice is calm. Professional. Begin the test. The test begins. Stolyarchuk closes the turbine stop valves. Steam flow cuts off. The turbines begin their coast down. Spinning freely now, gradually slowing, using their momentum to generate electricity. The cooling pumps continue to run, powered by the dying rotation. 40 seconds. That's all they need. The control room settles into observation mode. Eyes on instruments. Waiting. Watching. The turbines are doing their job. The pumps are running. Everything is proceeding as planned. This part, at least, is working exactly as it should. But something else is happening. Something the operators can't see directly. As the turbines coast down, the electrical load on the generators decreases. This affects the coolant pumps. Their speed drops slightly. Not much, just a few percent. But that means slightly less coolant flowing through the reactor core, which means slightly more steam forming in the coolant channels, which means slightly less neutron absorption by water, which means the reactor power wants to increase. Under normal conditions, this wouldn't matter. The reactor has feedback mechanisms, automatic controls, safety systems that respond to power changes. But these aren't normal conditions. The reactor is poisoned with xenon, barely sustaining itself. Most control rods are withdrawn, and the emergency systems that would normally intervene have been disconnected for the test. Topchinov sees the power begin to rise. Slowly at first. 210 megawatts. 215. He makes small adjustments, trying to keep it level. But the reactor is responding sluggishly. The xenon is still there, still absorbing neutrons. The control systems are fighting against multiple competing effects. The instruments show other changes too. Steam pressure is fluctuating, not wildly, just small variations. The coolant flow is slightly uneven between different parts of the core. Again, nothing dramatic. Nothing that screams danger. Just indications that the reactor isn't quite in equilibrium. That forces are shifting. That the balance is more delicate than it appears. Historians still argue whether the operators should have recognized these signs as warnings. Some point out that our BMK reactors normally showed similar fluctuations during routine operations. Others note that the specific combination of indicators, low power, high xenon, minimal control rod insertion, reduced coolant stability, created a unique and dangerous situation that the operators weren't trained to recognize. Akimov watches the displays. He sees the same numbers Topchanov sees. Power creeping upward. Coolant flow variations. Steam pressure changes. Are these normal test artifacts? Are they concerning? The parameters are still within broad operational limits. Nothing is in the red zone. Nothing is triggering automatic shutdowns. Just anomalies. Deviations. The kind of thing that happens when you run complex tests. The clock advances. 20 seconds into the test. The turbines continue to coast. The pumps continue to run. So far, the fundamental question is being answered. Yes, the rotational inertia can power the cooling systems during the gap before diesel generators start. The test is proving its point, but the reactor power continues to rise. 220 megawatts. 230. Topchanov compensates. Another control rod adjustment. The power levels off briefly, then continues climbing. 240, 250. This isn't right. The power should be holding steady. Why is it increasing? There's a lesser-known detail about RBMK reactors that becomes crucial here. They have what's called a positive void coefficient. In simple terms, it means that when steam bubbles form in the coolant channels, the reactor becomes more reactive. More steam equals more power. More power equals more heat. More heat equals more steam. It's a feedback loop. Under normal conditions, with proper control rod insertion and stable coolant flow, this effect is manageable. But here, now, with so few control rods and unstable cooling, the feedback can accelerate. Nobody in the control room discusses void coefficients. That's reactor physics, design characteristics. The operators work with the controls they have, the displays they can see. And right now, those displays are showing power rising beyond what they want. 30 seconds into the test. The turbines are still coasting, but slowing significantly. The pumps are still running, but with reduced power. The diesel generators should be starting any moment. Almost there. Just 10 more seconds. Then the test is complete. Then they can stabilize everything. Return to normal. But the reactor power reaches 270 megawatts. Then 300. Topchanov is working the controls continuously now. Not frantically, but with clear urgency. Akimov is right beside him, both trying to understand what's happening. Why is the power increasing when they're trying to hold it down? The answer is in the physics. The reduced coolant flow created more steam. The steam reduced neutron absorption. The power increased. The increased power created more heat. More heat created more steam. The loop is running. Slowly, not explosively, but definitively. And with most control rods already withdrawn, there's limited capacity to suppress it. Someone suggests inserting control rods manually to bring the power back down. It's the obvious solution, the correct response. But there's hesitation. If they insert rods now, during the test, they'll have to abort, restart everything, delay again. And the power isn't that high, just 300 megawatts. That's still only 10% of normal. Still controllable. Probably. The dosimeters in the room show normal background radiation. The containment readings are fine. The coolant chemistry is stable. Everything except the power level looks normal. Maybe this is just a temporary fluctuation. Maybe it will level off on its own. Maybe they're overreacting. The test is almost complete. 35 seconds. The diesel generators are starting, beginning their startup sequence. Almost there. Just a few more seconds. Then they can address the power issue. Then they can stabilize. Then everything returns to routine. Dyatlov watches from back. He sees the power rising. He sees Topchanov working the controls. But he also sees that nothing is failing. No system is breaking down. The test is succeeding in its primary objective. The turbine coast down is working. The concept is proven. A few anomalies don't invalidate the entire procedure. 40 seconds. The test window is complete. The diesel generators are online. The cooling pumps transition to diesel power. Smooth. Successful. The test technically has worked. The question has been answered. The reactor can maintain cooling during a station blackout. But the power is still climbing. 320 megawatts. 340. And the reactor isn't stabilizing. The xenon that made it so hard to sustain power earlier is now burning away from the increased neutron flux, which means less neutron absorption, which means more reactivity. The feedback loops are all pointing in the same direction now. Upward. Akimov makes a decision. They need to shut down. Not emergency shutdown. Just normal shutdown. Insert the control rods. Bring the power down properly. End this test. Deal with the consequences later. He gives the order. Topchanov nods. Reaches for the controls. But before he can act, before the rods begin to move, someone else makes a different choice. 1:23 and 40 seconds a.m. Akimov presses the AZ5 button. Emergency shutdown. Scram. The ultimate safety command. Every control rod in the reactor begins to insert simultaneously. All 211 of them. Dropping into the core. Designed to stop the reaction completely. Designed to make the reactor safe. This is the correct action. The safe action. The responsible thing to do when power is rising unexpectedly. Hit AZ5. Insert all the rods. Stop everything. Deal with the consequences later. Better to shut down unnecessarily than to let an unstable situation continue. The button clicks. Lights change on the panel. Motors engage throughout the reactor building. The control rods begin their descent, moving at normal insertion speed. Not fast, just steady. Gravity and motors working together. 18 seconds to full insertion. That's the design. 18 seconds from command to complete shutdown. Topchanov watches the rod position indicators. They're moving, descending. Everything is working as it should. The reactor will shut down. The power will drop. Crisis averted. In 18 seconds, this will all be over. But something else happens first. Something the operators can't see. Something hidden in the physics and the design. Those control rods with graphite tips. The ones that are currently fully withdrawn. As they begin to insert from the top of the core, the graphite displaces water in the upper sections of the fuel channels. Graphite moderates neutrons. Water absorbs them. So briefly, for just a moment, there's an increase in moderation at the top of the core. An increase in reactivity. A power surge. Under normal conditions, with dozens of control rods already partially inserted, this effect is negligible, barely noticeable. A tiny blip before the boron carbide sections take over and shut everything down. But these aren't normal conditions. Only 18 rods were inserted before AZ5 was pressed. The reactor is already running with positive void coefficient feedback. Already unstable. Already climbing in power. The graphite tips enter the core. Reactivity increases. Power spikes. Not a small spike. A large one. Sudden. Violent. The kind of power excursion that happens in milliseconds. That overwhelms cooling systems. That creates more steam, which increases reactivity further, which creates more power, which creates more steam. The feedback loop that was climbing slowly before now accelerates beyond control. Historians still argue whether this design flaw was known to the operators. Some evidence suggests reactor physicists understood the tip effect but considered it acceptable under normal operating conditions. Others argue the operations staff was never properly briefed on this specific vulnerability. A few suggest that even if they had known, There was no alternative action available at that moment. The power meter jumps. 500 megawatts. 1,000, 2,000. The needle swings so fast it's hard to track. Topchinov stares at it. Akhimov stares at it. This isn't possible. This doesn't make sense. They press the shutdown button. The reactor should be stopping, not accelerating. 5,000 megawatts. 10,000. Numbers that shouldn't exist. Power levels far beyond the reactor's design capacity. The fuel begins to shatter. Ceramic pellets cracking from thermal shock. Metal cladding rupturing. Steam pressure building inside the fuel channels. Building faster than it can escape. The control rods jam. About a third of the way into the core, they stop moving. The channels are deforming from the heat. Warping. Blocking the descent. The rods that were supposed to save everything are stuck. Frozen. Unable to complete their insertion. The reactor is now in a state it was never designed to reach. Beyond any safety analysis. Beyond any emergency procedure. 30,000 megawatts. The estimate would come later. At the moment, the instruments simply peg at their maximum readings. The core temperature is rising through 2,000 degrees Celsius. Through 3,000. The fuel is melting. The coolant is flashing to steam faster than the pumps can supply water. Pressure is building. Enormous pressure. The reactor vessel itself is becoming a bomb. There's a sound. A deep rumbling. Felt more than heard. The building trembles. Not like an earthquake. More like something massive shifting. Something fundamental giving way. The operators feel it through the floor. Through the walls. A vibration that resonates in your chest. Akhimov and Topchinov exchange a glance. Wide eyes. Confusion. Fear. What's happening? What do we do? The shutdown button was supposed to save the reactor. Supposed to make it safe. Why is everything getting worse? A lesser-known detail. In the seconds after AZ-5 was pressed, some operators in the room reportedly smelled ozone. That sharp electric scent. The smell of ionizing radiation splitting oxygen molecules in the air. The smell that indicates something has gone very wrong. But there's no protocol for what to do when you smell ozone while standing in a nuclear control room. The lights flicker. Power fluctuations. The control room is still stable. Still intact. But something is happening in the reactor hall. Something catastrophic. The rumbling grows louder. The floor shakes more violently. Papers slide off desks. A tea glass falls. Shatters. Nobody notices. The pressure inside the reactor vessel has exceeded all limits. The fuel channels are rupturing. Steam and hydrogen gas are mixing. The temperature is so high that metal is reacting with steam, stripping oxygen atoms, liberating hydrogen. Hydrogen is accumulating, building, waiting for ignition. Dyatlov stands frozen, staring at the panels, at the impossible readings. This can't be right. The reactor can't be at these power levels. The instruments must be malfunctioning. The sensors must be wrong. The reactor has a negative power coefficient. It's supposed to be self-limiting. It can't explode. Reactors don't explode. But deep in the core, physics doesn't care about design philosophy. The runaway reaction continues. Fuel is vaporizing. Steam pressure is astronomical. The massive metal structures containing the reactor are straining, failing, about to give way. The rumbling becomes a roar. Then something sharper, a crack, like a gunshot, but deeper, louder. The sound of metal tearing, of massive structures failing. The reactor vessel lid, a 2,000-ton assembly of steel and concrete, lifts, just slightly at first, then more. The pressure underneath is so great that nothing can contain it. 43 seconds have passed since the AZ-5 button was pressed. 43 seconds since the action that was supposed to save everything. 43 seconds of power climbing beyond imagination, of fuel shattering, of pressure building, of physics following its inexorable path. And then the reactor explodes. The sound is muffled, not the cinematic explosion you might imagine, more like a deep, contained thump. The kind of sound you feel in your bones before you hear it with your ears. The building shudders. Hard. Equipment rattles. The fluorescent lights swing slightly on their fixtures. Dust falls from the ceiling. Fine particles drifting down through the light. For a moment, everything goes silent. The roar stops. The rumbling ceases. Just this strange, suspended quiet, like the world is holding its breath. The operators stand frozen, staring at panels, at each other, at nothing, trying to process what just happened. Then a second sound, sharper, louder, a crack that echoes through the structure. This one is different, more violent. The building shakes again, harder this time. The lights flicker, go dark. Emergency lighting kicks in, dimmer, reddish, casting strange shadows across the control room. The power meters drop to 0. All of them. Every reactor parameter flatlines. Temperature, pressure, neutron flux. Everything. Complete loss of instrumentation. Either the sensors are destroyed or the connections are severed. Either way, the control room is suddenly blind. Topchanov's hands hover over controls that no longer respond. Switches that do nothing. The panel that was his interface to the reactor is now just metal and glass. Dead. Inert. He looks at Akimov. Akimov looks back. Neither speaks. What is there to say? The emergency communications system crackles. A voice from the turbine hall. Distorted. Urgent. Asking what happened. Reporting damage. Reporting injuries. The transmission cuts off. Static. Then nothing. The intercom system is failing. Circuits are breaking down throughout the complex. Dyatlov moves toward the panel, stares at the dead instruments. His mind is working, calculating, trying to understand. The reactor shut down. It must have. Loss of instrumentation doesn't mean catastrophe. It means electrical failure, equipment damage, not reactor destruction. The reactor is intact. It has to be. He says it out loud. To the room. To himself. The reactor is intact. This is instrumentation failure. Electrical damage from the turbine hall. The explosion was hydrogen. Steam, not the core. The core is fine. The reactor is shut down and intact. But there's a detail that contradicts this. A lesser-known observation that several operators would later report. The air smells different. Not just dust and smoke. Something sharper, more chemical. And there's a taste. Metallic, bitter, on the tongue, in the throat. That's not from burning insulation. That's not from hydrogen combustion. That's something else. Historians still argue about what the operators understood in these first minutes. Some suggest they immediately knew the core was destroyed, but couldn't accept it. Others argue they genuinely believed the reactor vessel was intact, and the damage was limited to auxiliary systems. A few point out that the RBMK design made it nearly impossible for operators to directly observe the reactor state during emergencies. Akimov picks up a phone, calls the reactor hall. No answer. Calls the pump room. No answer. Calls the emergency response station. The line is dead. He tries another phone. Another line. Static. Partial connection. A voice. Broken. Reporting fire. Reporting debris. Reporting that the reactor hall roof is gone. That they can see the sky. See the sky. Through the reactor hall roof. That shouldn't be possible. The roof is reinforced concrete. Layers of steel. Designed to contain anything. If the roof is gone, if they can see the sky, then something catastrophic happened. Something beyond equipment failure. But Dyatlov insists. The reactor is intact. It must be. Reactors don't explode. The core is surrounded by steel and concrete. Contained. Protected. Whatever explosion occurred was external. Steam. Hydrogen. Coolant pipes rupturing. Not the reactor itself. Someone suggests checking radiation levels. The dosimeters. The area monitors. Akimov nods. Good idea. If there's core damage, if fuel is exposed, radiation levels would be elevated. That's definitive. That's measurable. An operator checks the wall-mounted dosimeter. The needle is moving, rising, but not dramatically. A few microinkins per second. elevated above background, but not catastrophic, not consistent with a destroyed reactor core. This reading supports Dyatlov's assessment. Instrumentation damage, not core breach. But there's something wrong with this reading, something the operators don't know yet. The wall dosimeter has a maximum range. It can measure up to a certain level. Beyond that, it pegs at maximum and shows nothing more. It's designed for normal operations, for small leaks, for routine monitoring, not for catastrophe, not for the kind of radiation field that exists outside the building right now. The dosimeter shows what it can show. And because it's not screaming danger, because it's showing a number that seems manageable, it provides false reassurance. The operators believe what the instrument tells them. Why wouldn't they? Outside the control room, reality is different. The reactor hull is destroyed. The roof has collapsed. The reactor vessel itself has been torn apart. Chunks of graphite moderator are scattered across the ground. Some burning, some just lying there. Radioactive, exposed to the open air. The explosion lifted the 2,000-ton upper biological shield, the massive lid that caps the reactor. Lifted it, tilted it, dropped it back down at an angle, partially covering the ruins, partially exposing them. Below that, the reactor core is gone. Not damaged, not breached. Gone, destroyed, vaporized in some places, scattered in others. An open wound in the building, glowing in the darkness. But in the control room, none of this is visible. The operators see dead instruments, emergency lighting, dust in the air. They hear reports of damage, but nothing definitive. Nothing that proves the reactor is destroyed. Just confusion, partial information, conflicting reports. Akimov makes a decision. They need to go see, physically, with eyes. Walk to the reactor hall. Look at the damage. Understand what happened. Instruments can fail. Reports can be confused. But direct observation doesn't lie. Topchanov volunteers to go with him. Others as well. They'll take flashlights, portable dosimeters, go to the reactor hall, assess the situation, report back. It's the rational thing to do. The necessary thing. You can't manage what you can't see. They leave the control room. The emergency lighting casts long shadows in the corridors. Smoke is drifting through the hallways. Not thick, just wisps. The air still tastes wrong, still smells chemical. Their footsteps echo. The building feels different, wounded, changed. The control room remains. Other operators at their stations, watching dead panels, waiting for information, waiting for understanding. The clock on the wall still works. Battery powered. It shows 1:28 a.m. 5 minutes since the explosion. 5 minutes into the worst nuclear disaster in history. And they still don't fully comprehend what's happened. The corridor feels wrong. The walls are the same. The floors are the same. But something fundamental has changed. The building sounds different. Creaks and groans that weren't there before. Akimov and Topchanov walk carefully. Their flashlight beams cut through smoke that drifts lazily in the still air. They pass other workers, people moving in both directions, some heading toward the damage, others heading away. Faces show confusion, concern, but not panic. Not yet. This is still a situation to be managed, a problem to be solved. The air grows warmer as they move closer to the reactor hall. And that taste, that metallic bitterness, stronger now, more pronounced. Topchanov notices it, mentions it to Akimov. Akimov nods. He tastes it too. They don't discuss what it means. Not out loud, but both know. That's ionizing radiation. That's your body reacting to gamma rays. Their portable dosimeters click, slowly at first. Individual clicks you can count. Then faster. A rhythm building. The radiation field is increasing as they approach. But the meters still show numbers that seem survivable. Roentgens per hour, not per second. Elevated. Dangerous if you stay too long, but not immediately lethal. They reach the door to the reactor hall. It's damaged, bent, partially open. Smoke pours through the gap. Thick now, gray and acrid. Something is burning. Akimov pulls the door wider. The hinges protest, metal scraping metal, and then they see inside. The reactor hull is destroyed. Not damaged. Destroyed. The roof is gone. Completely. Steel beams twisted. Concrete shattered. Debris everywhere. And in the center, where the reactor should be covered, contained, protected, there's just wreckage. Rubble. And through the smoke, a glow. Faint. Reddish. Like embers. But this isn't fire. Topchinov stares. His mind struggles to process the image. The reactor cap. The massive biological shield. It should be horizontal. Flat. Sealing the core. But it's tilted. Propped up at an angle. Like a lid knocked askew. Below it, shadows and smoke. And that glow. Historians still argue about what the operators saw in those first moments. Some accounts describe seeing actual fuel assemblies exposed. Others report only seeing steam and smoke. A few suggest the view was so obscure that direct observation of the core wasn't possible. But all agree on one detail. The reactor hull structure was catastrophically damaged. Akimov's dosimeter is clicking faster now. A steady stream. He checks the reading. Rising. Several Roentgens per hour. That's significant. That's evacuate the area significant. But not the thousands of Roentgens per hour that an exposed reactor core would produce. The numbers still don't match the visual evidence. This disconnect is crucial. It shapes the decisions that follow. The operators believe their instruments. They're trained to trust measurements over impressions. And the measurements say this is bad, but survivable. Dangerous, but manageable. There's a lesser-known detail about radiation detection in these conditions. The portable dosimeters they're carrying are designed for routine work. They max out at a certain level. Beyond that, they either break or show nonsensical readings. Right now, the meters are lying. Not intentionally, just because they're being asked to measure something they weren't built to measure. A firefighter runs past them, heading into the reactor hull. No protective gear, just his regular uniform. Akimov tries to stop him. Too dangerous. But the firefighter brushes past. There's fire. That's what he does. The radiation is invisible. The flames are real. Topchinov sees pieces of graphite scattered on the ground. Black chunks, some the size of a fist, some larger. They're glowing slightly. Not from heat alone, from radioactivity. These are pieces of the reactor core. Moderator blocks. They shouldn't be outside the reactor vessel. They shouldn't exist as scattered debris. He points them out to Akimov. Akimov sees them, understands what they mean. But the cognitive dissonance is overwhelming. Those can't be from the reactor core. They must be from some other system. The reactor core is contained. Those must be graphite from control systems. From shielding. They retreat. Back into the corridor. Away from the smoke and the heat and the clicking dosimeters. They need to report. To tell Dyatlov. To explain what they saw. But how do you explain something impossible? The walk back feels longer. Heavier. The metallic taste is stronger. Topchinov feels nauseous. Akimov's skin itches. Early symptoms. Radiation exposure. Cells already damaged. But they don't connect these sensations to lethality. Not yet. They just feel unwell. Stressed. They pass windows. Outside, the night is still dark. But there's a glow now. Above the reactor building. A column of light. Bluish-white. Rising into the sky. Ionized air. The visible signature of an exposed nuclear reactor. Beautiful in a terrible way. Like an aurora. Some workers are standing at the windows. Watching the glow. Mesmerized. Nobody tells them to move away. Nobody warns them that the windows offer no protection. That they're bathing in gamma radiation. Akimov and Topchinov return to the control room. The other operators look up. Expectant. Waiting for answers. Dyatlov stands from his chair. Well, what did you see? Is the reactor intact? Akimov hesitates, choosing words carefully. The reactor hull is severely damaged. The roof is destroyed. There's debris. Fire. Significant structural collapse. We couldn't see the reactor clearly. Too much smoke. But the damage is extensive. Dyatlov absorbs this. Processes. The reactor hull can be damaged without the reactor itself being destroyed. The explosion was in the hall. Steam. Hydrogen. The reactor is below. Contained. The biological shield would have protected it. The core is intact. It must be. Topchanov mentions the graphite pieces. Dyatlov dismisses them. From the control rods. From shielding. Not from the core. The core is sealed. The room settles into an uneasy acceptance. The reactor is badly damaged. The containment might be breached. Radiation levels are elevated. But the core itself, the fuel, the heart of the reactor, that's still intact. Still contained. Still possible to save. This belief shapes everything that follows. The decisions, the actions, the exposure of workers to lethal radiation fields. Because if the core is intact, then standard emergency procedures apply. You cool it. You stabilize it. You save the reactor. But outside, reality waits. The core isn't intact. It's destroyed, scattered, burning. The hours that follow blur together. A succession of attempts, efforts, actions taken based on incomplete understanding. Dyatlov orders water pumped into the reactor. Standard procedure for overheating. If the core is intact, it needs cooling. If fuel is exposed, water will protect it. Prevent further damage. Contain the situation. Akimov coordinates the effort. Valves are opened. Pumps are activated. Water flows through pipes toward the reactor vessel, or what remains of it. The operators watch gauges, waiting for pressure to build, for temperature to drop, for some indication that the cooling is working. But the gauges show nothing. No pressure increase. No temperature response. The water is going somewhere. Disappearing. Either the sensors are destroyed, or the water is simply pouring through ruptured pipes, through the destroyed reactor vessel, spilling onto the reactor hall floor, mixing with radioactive debris, creating contaminated runoff that flows into lower levels, into the drainage system, into the ground. Topchanov stays at his station, even though the controls are dead, even though the reactor doesn't respond. He's the senior reactor control engineer. This is his position, his responsibility. He'll stay until relieved, until told otherwise. That's what you do. Historians still argue whether continuing to pump water was the right decision. Some suggest it helped cool remaining fuel fragments. Others argue it spread contamination and created additional steam that carried radioactive particles higher into the atmosphere. A few point out that with no functioning instrumentation, the operators had no way to know if their actions helped or hurt. Around 3 a.m., shift change approaches. Normally, a new crew would arrive. Fresh operators, rested minds. But tonight isn't normal. The day shift is called an early. Emergency manning. Everyone available. The control room begins to fill with more people. More confusion. More questions without answers. Someone brings tea. Hot. Sweet. The operators drink mechanically. The warmth helps somehow. Give their hands something to do. Topchanov notices his cup shaking slightly. His hands trembling. Fatigue. Stress. Radiation. All of the above. Outside, firefighters continue their work. Local brigade from Pripyat. They're on the reactor building roof, spraying water on burning debris. Graphite fires are difficult. Graphite burns hot. Water doesn't always help. Sometimes it makes things worse. But what else do? You fight fire with water. That's the training. Some of those firefighters will be dead within days. Others within weeks. The radiation on that roof is incomprehensible. Thousands of Roentgens per hour. Tens of thousands in some spots. Standing there. Working there. Breathing the smoke. It's a death sentence delivered in minutes, but executed slowly. Over days. Over weeks of suffering. But they don't know this. Their dosimeters, like the operators, max out and show nothing useful. They feel fine. A little nauseous maybe. A headache. But adrenaline covers a lot. Duty covers more. You do your job. You save what can be saved. In the control room, someone mentions evacuating Pripyat. The town is close. 3 kilometers. 50,000 people. If radiation levels are truly elevated, if there's contamination spreading, shouldn't people be moved? Moved away? Moved to safety? The suggestion is noted, but not acted on. Not yet. Evacuation is a massive undertaking. It requires authority beyond what's present in this room. It requires confirmation, proof, and the official position is still that the reactor core is intact. Damaged, yes. Leaking radiation, possibly, but contained, not destroyed, not scattered across the landscape. There's a lesser-known detail about Soviet nuclear emergency protocols. They were designed around the assumption that reactor vessels were indestructible, that containment would hold. That core damage might occur, but core destruction couldn't. The plans assumed localized radiation release. Not this. Not an open reactor burning in the night air. The protocols don't account for what's actually happening. Dyatlov leaves the control room. He needs to coordinate with other departments, with plant management, with external authorities. Someone needs to take charge. Someone needs to explain this to Moscow, to the regional government, to the party officials who will want answers. Akimov remains. He's shift foreman until properly relieved. That hasn't happened yet. So he stays, monitoring dead instruments, coordinating workers who are being exposed to radiation they can't properly measure, trying to save a reactor that no longer exists. Topchanov looks at the clock. 4:30 a.m. Almost 3 hours since the explosion. It feels like minutes. It feels like days. Time has lost its normal texture. Everything exists in this suspended moment. This ongoing emergency that hasn't resolved. Hasn't concluded. Just continues. And continues. His skin itches more now. His stomach hurts. Not terrible. Just uncomfortable. Persistent. He thinks about his wife. Home in their apartment. Sleeping. Unaware. She'll wake up in a few hours. Make breakfast. Wonder why he's not home yet. Eventually, someone will tell her. Eventually, she'll know. Outside the windows, the sky is beginning to lighten. Not sunrise yet. Just that pre-dawn glow. The darkness thinning at the edges. The column of light above the reactor is less visible now. Not because it's gone. Because the ambient light is increasing, making it harder to see. But it's still there. Still rising. Still carrying radioactive particles into the atmosphere. Into the wind. Across borders. The operators don't discuss the future. Don't speculate about consequences. About health effects. About careers. About blame. That's all theoretical. Abstract. Right now, there's just the immediate. The next action. The next decision. Keep the water flowing. Monitor what can be monitored. Wait for dawn. Wait for relief. Wait for someone with more authority to take control. Some workers are already showing symptoms. Vomiting. Severe headaches. Skin turning red in patches. These are the ones who went closest to the reactor. Who entered the most contaminated areas. Who stayed longest. They're sent to the medical facility. The doctors there don't fully understand what they're treating. Radiation exposure this severe isn't in their textbooks. Not their experience. They do what they can. For fluids, anti-nausea medication, reassurance. The control room continues its vigil. Operators at stations, watching dead panels, implementing procedures designed for a different catastrophe. A manageable one, a contained one. The gap between their understanding and reality remains, slowly narrowing as more information arrives, as more evidence accumulates. But not closed. Not yet. Dawn is coming. The town will wake. Children will prepare for school. People will start their Saturday routines. And above them, invisible, the plume spreads. The contamination settles. The future is already being written, already determined, but not yet understood. Dawn arrives fully by 6 a.m. Sunlight touches the edges of the reactor complex. Normal light. Ordinary Saturday morning light. But nothing about this morning is ordinary. The night shift has been on duty for nearly 10 hours, far beyond their scheduled time. But there's no relief yet. No formal handover. The emergency continues. Someone suggests going outside, actually outside the building, to see the reactor in daylight, in clear visibility, without smoke obscuring the view, without darkness hiding details, just direct observation. Confirmation of what's really there. A small group volunteers. Akimov doesn't go this time. He's needed in the control room. But others do. Operators. Technicians. People who need to see with their own eyes. They exit through a side door. Emergency lighting gives way to natural light. The air outside tastes worse somehow. More chemical. More wrong. They walk around the building, moving toward a vantage point. And then they see it. In full daylight. Unobscured. The reactor building. The roof completely gone. The structure exposed. And in the center, where the reactor should be sealed under layers of concrete and steel, there's just wreckage and light. The morning sun illuminates what the darkness partially hid. The reactor core is visible. Not intact. Not contained. Destroyed. Scattered. Pieces of fuel assemblies. Graphite blocks. Control rod fragments. All exposed to open air. Some still glowing with residual heat. Some smoking. The biological shield that should cap everything is tilted at an impossible angle. Propped up like a broken lid. But there's something else. Something that shouldn't be possible. A blue-white shimmer in the air above the ruins. Not smoke. Not heat distortion. Something else. Cherenkov radiation. The visible glow of particles moving faster than light travels through air. A phenomenon that occurs inside reactor pools. Inside containment. Not outside. Not exposed to the morning sky. One of the observers has a camera. He takes photographs. Click. Advance. Click. Advance. Documenting the impossible. The images will be developed later. Studied. Analyzed. They'll become evidence. Proof. Historical record. But right now, they're just a compulsion. I need to capture this moment. This site that shouldn't exist. Historians still argue about why the core remained visible and glowing rather than simply melting down into the earth. Some point to the graphite fire maintaining high temperatures. Others note that portions of the fuel were ejected entirely from the reactor pit. A few suggest the specific design of the RBMK, with its individual fuel channels, prevented the kind of total meltdown that other reactor types might experience. The group retreats back inside, back to the control room. They report what they saw. No ambiguity now. No room for interpretation. The reactor core is destroyed, exposed, burning. The denial that sustained the night shift finally breaks. Not dramatically, just quietly, like accepting an unwelcome truth you've been avoiding. Topchinov hears the report. He already knew, in some part of his mind, but hearing it confirmed. Stated plainly, that changes something. The reactor he was responsible for, the system he was trained to protect. It's gone. Not damaged. Gone. And he pressed the buttons that led to this. He followed procedures. He did what he was told. And the reactor exploded. The thought doesn't come with panic. Or anger. Just a heavy, settling weight. Understanding. Consequence. He looks at his hands. They're shaking more now. Not from fear. From cellular damage. From radiation destroying tissue faster than it can repair. His body is already dying. The process started hours ago. Invisible. Inexorable. There's a lesser-known detail about the morning after the explosion. Many workers in the plant continued performing their regular duties. Maintenance staff. Security guards. Administrative personnel. Not because they were ordered to ignore the disaster, but because nobody told them to leave. Nobody activated full evacuation procedures. The assumption was that most areas of the plant were safe. That radiation was localized to the reactor hall. That normal operations could continue elsewhere. Around 7 a.m., someone finally mentions evacuation of Pripyat. Not as a suggestion now, as an urgent necessity. The radiation measurements are climbing. Not the faulty portable dosimeters. Actual survey equipment, properly calibrated, showing readings that indicate serious contamination spreading. The town is downwind. The plume is drifting directly over residential areas. But evacuation requires authorization from regional authorities, from Moscow, from the party. You don't evacuate 50,000 people on local initiative. That's political. That's consequential. That requires approval from the top. Calls are made. Reports are sent. The information travels up the chain of command. Each level processing, each level deciding what to share, what to emphasize, what to minimize. The reactor is damaged. Radiation is elevated. The situation is serious, but perhaps not catastrophic, perhaps manageable, perhaps contained. In Pripyat, people are waking up. Children are playing outside. The weather's nice. Spring morning. Warm sun. Clear sky. Some residents notice the emergency vehicles, the unusual activity at the plant. But that's not alarming. Accidents happen. Equipment fails. The plant has procedures. Professionals are handling it. Nobody tells them about the invisible cloud drifting overhead, about the radioactive particles settling on playgrounds, on gardens, on rooftops. Nobody warns them to go inside, to close windows, to avoid the milk from local cows that are already grazing on contaminated grass. The information gap between what's known and what's shared remains vast. Back in the control room, Akimov is finally relieved. Someone with higher authority arrives, takes command. Akimov is told to go to the medical facility, get checked, get treatment if needed. He nods, stands. His legs are unsteady. The floor feels distant. Strange. He walks slowly, each step deliberate. Topchanov is told the same. Go to medical. Both of them, and others. Anyone who was in the control room during the explosion. Anyone who went near the reactor hall. Anyone showing symptoms. They're led away, quietly, professionally, to a medical facility that's already overwhelmed, already receiving casualties beyond its capacity. The control room empties of its night shift. New operators take positions. Fresh faces. Rested minds. But they inherit the same dead panels. The same lack of information. The same destroyed reactor. The emergency hasn't ended. It's just changed shifts. Outside, the sun climbs higher. The morning advances. And in Moscow, officials are beginning to understand the scale of what happened. The implications. The international consequences. The disaster that can't be hidden. Can't be minimized. Can't be undone. The story of that control room doesn't end with the night shift leaving. It continues for days. For weeks. New operators maintaining positions at dead panels. Monitoring what little can be monitored. Coordinating efforts to contain a disaster that's already escaped containment. But the men who were there that night, the ones who pressed the buttons, who followed the procedures, who witnessed the impossible, their story follows a different path. Akimov and Topchanov are taken to the medical facility in Pripyat first, then transferred to Moscow, to Hospital Number 6, the specialized facility for radiation casualties. They're placed in isolation rooms, white walls, sterile equipment, doctors who understand radiation sickness in theory but have limited experience treating exposures this severe. The symptoms progress. Nausea becomes constant. Skin burns develop, not from external fire, from radiation destroying cells from within. Their bone marrow stops producing blood cells. Their immune systems collapse. Their bodies begin to fail in ways that modern medicine can document but not prevent, not reverse, not cure. Topchanov dies on May 14th, 18 days after the explosion. He's 26 years old. His wife visits when she can, sits beside his bed, holds his hand even though the doctors warn against prolonged contact. He remains radioactive. His body itself is contaminated, breaking down, becoming something medical science can observe but not save. Akimov dies on May 11th, 15 days after. 33 years old, father of 2 young children. In his final days, he asks about the other operators, about the firefighters, about whether they contained the reactor, whether they saved anything. The doctors tell him what he needs to hear, that his efforts mattered, that he did everything possible. Whether he believes them is unclear. Historians still argue about culpability, about blame. Some point to design flaws in the RBMK reactor that the operators couldn't have known. Others note procedural violations, decisions made under pressure that deviated from safety protocols. A few suggest the entire Soviet nuclear program operated with institutional failures that made disaster inevitable. That Chernobyl was waiting to happen. That these men were simply the ones on shift when it did. But in that control room, on that night, they were just people doing their jobs. Following orders, trusting their training, believing their instruments, making decisions with incomplete information under extreme pressure. They weren't villains. They weren't heroes. They were operators, engineers, technicians, trying to manage a system that was already beyond management. Dyatlov survived. He received a severe radiation dose, but not immediately lethal. He was tried, convicted, sentenced to 10 years in a labor camp for safety violations. Released after serving 5. He spent the rest of his life insisting the reactor design was flawed, that the operators were scapegoats, that he did nothing wrong. Whether that's denial or truth, or some mixture of both remains debated. Pripyat was evacuated on April 27th, the day after the explosion. 36 hours of exposure before buses arrived. Residents were told to take only essentials. They'd be back in 3 days. It was temporary, precautionary. The apartments would wait. The belongings would be safe. They never returned. The city remains abandoned. Frozen in 1986. A ghost town. A monument to that night. The zone around Chernobyl was evacuated in expanding circles. Villages, farms, entire regions. Over 300,000 people displaced. Some temporarily, some permanently. Land contaminated for generations. For centuries in some places. The disaster spread in ways that night shift couldn't have imagined, couldn't have prevented, couldn't have stopped. There's a lesser-known detail about the final toll. 28 people died from acute radiation sickness in the weeks following the explosion. Firefighters, plant workers, emergency responders. But the long-term casualties are harder to count. Thyroid cancers in children, leukemia, other radiation-induced diseases developing over years, over decades. Some estimates suggest thousands of additional deaths, others tens of thousands. The true number remains uncertain, contested, unmeasurable. The control room itself was eventually sealed, buried under the sarcophagus, the massive concrete and steel structure built to entomb the destroyed reactor. The panels where Topchinov sat, where Akimov stood, where decisions were made and buttons were pressed. All hidden now, radioactive, inaccessible, part of the tomb. But we can still stand there in memory, in reconstruction, in understanding what happened. We know the sequence now, the physics, the design flaws, the decisions, the consequences. We know because they documented everything, because survivors testified, because the disaster was too large to hide completely, too significant to bury entirely. You've been in that control room for 12 sections now, 12,000 words, 12 chapters of a story that happened in hours but echoes across decades. You stood beside operators who are no longer alive, who died trying to contain what couldn't be contained, who believed they could save what was already lost. And now you can step back, step away, return to your own time, your own place. You're safe. The radiation can't reach you through history, through narrative, through the distance of years. You can learn from their experience without sharing their fate. That's the gift and the burden of remembering. The Chernobyl disaster changed nuclear safety worldwide. New protocols, new designs, new understanding of what can go wrong, new respect for the physics involved. The operators who died that night contributed to that change. Not intentionally, not heroically, just through the terrible fact of what happened when everything went wrong at once. So rest now. Let the story settle. Let the knowledge integrate. You've walked through one of history's darkest industrial disasters. You've seen it from inside, from the perspective of people who lived it, who didn't survive it, but who deserve to be remembered as more than statistics, more than cautionary tales, as people who went to work one night and encountered something beyond their preparation, beyond their control, beyond their survival. The lights in your room are safer than the lights in that control room. The air you breathe is cleaner. The ground beneath you is stable. You're here, now, distant from that April night in 1986. Distant from the control room. Distant from the disaster. But closer to understanding. Closer to remembering. Closer to honoring the complicated truth of what happened when human systems met their limits. Sweet dreams.